Welcome to The Smart Divorce on Divorce Source Radio, helping you move forward with focus, hope, and confidence, saving you time, money, and your sanity as you build a better life post-divorce. I'm Steve Peck. Deborah Moskovitch, divorce consultant, educator, and author of The Smart Divorce, brings you the leading experts and researchers in the divorce arena. We'll also be speaking with those in the trenches, people who've learned from their divorce and how their experience has changed their lives. And they would tell you for the better. Deborah's learned that divorce can be a beginning, even if it looks like an end. Divorce can be rich in opportunity to learn and grow from. And we're going to explore how to take this information and create a positive post-divorce life. And now, here's Deborah.
Hey, Steve, how are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
Well, I'm really well. I've got an interesting topic today. We're talking about problem-solving lawyers.
Problem-solving lawyers.
Absolutely.
Isn't that what they're all supposed to be?
Supposed to be, I think, is the operative word. You know, I've been told when my vast research through the Smart Divorce is lawyers are taught to take positions at law school. But really, when you get down to think about it, family law requires problem solvers.
Yeah, it makes sense.
You know, family law, it's not a war to be won, but a problem to be solved. I heard that at a conference, that quote, and I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, I like it.
So let's talk to the lawyer who is going to help us, and that's Mark Baer. He's a family law lawyer, mediator, collaborative law lawyer. I mean, he's got all the thinking in terms of what problem solving really means, and he's been practicing for over 20 years. So he's got the expertise to share his thoughts on being that problem solving lawyer. And he's really well read too. Like he's done his research. I read many articles that he's written, which is how I found him. Mm-hmm. And what I like is that he gets people to think. Like when you're going through divorce, you don't want people making the decisions for you. No. You want to understand those decisions that you're making. Of course, your lawyer is going to set out all the options. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you are the one that's living with the decisions. Your lawyer moves on to the next file.
Right.
But you're the one that's living with the decisions of that divorce.
Mm-hmm. Tough time to make those important decisions when you're under emotional duress.
And that's why the consult is so important, so that you're finding the lawyer that has that same vision as you. And I really like the way that Mark thinks in terms of problem solving and not a conflict creator.
All right, well, let's get him on. Mark Baer, welcome to The Smart Divorce on Divorce Source Radio.
Thank you very much.
It is such a pleasure to have you here. And I love some of the articles I've read that you've written because it makes you think. And I think that's what we want to do today is help people think about the divorce process in a different way so that they look for a lawyer who's a problem solver as opposed to a problem contributor or a conflict creator, as you call them.
Exactly, a conflict creator.
Why do you believe problem solving is a hallmark of a good lawyer?
Well, even the American Bar Association on their website indicates that analytic or problem-solving skills are necessary for the development of a competent lawyer. The current dean of Stanford Law School, recently, I believe it was in May of 2010, said that good lawyers solve problems. And when you think about it, the only reason that a client goes to see a lawyer is because they have a problem. So therefore, if that's the case, lawyers are supposed to solve problems. That's the essence of a lawyer.
Good point.
When it comes to litigation, there are some that would say that lawyers help keep the conflict alive. So what should people look for then when they're looking for a lawyer and they know that they have to go to court?
Well, I don't know that they necessarily have to go to court. So I guess the two things don't necessarily go hand in hand. They may end up having to go to court, but in my mind, that's the last place that somebody wants to be in a family law dynamic. Mm-hmm. What I like to remind people is that there are situations in life in which going to court is okay. But if you have a next-door neighbor, for example, and you have a dispute with them, and you decide to litigate that dispute, who is really the winner and who's the loser? I mean, somebody might finish this thing and end up being the quote-unquote winner in court. But the reality is that unless the end result is that the next-door neighbors are no longer living next door to each other, is there really a winner? I mean, is that good, quote-unquote, feng shui? That's bad energy forever.
For real.
And if you're for real, and if you're dealing with a family dynamic, that isn't even a situation of just a next-door neighbor. You're dealing with a situation in which you have a mother and a father and children. And it doesn't matter if the children are 50 years old, because the reality is what that means is that the children who are 50 got used to their parents being a unit. And so to ignore the fact that by getting the divorce, they are no longer a unit, and thinking that this is not going to be stressful to the children is ridiculous. So it's just a question of degree and differences in terms of how people perceive it and deal with it if they're 50 years old or if they're 5.
Mm-hmm.
But
good point.
if you're no longer going to be a unit, what happens, for instance, when the 50-year-old was used to having his parents or her parents go to his or her holiday party, Thanksgiving, whatever event, and they went together, and that child has children of their own. Now, they're either going to pick favorites or they're going to alternate, and it's my view that if people handled things in a less destructive way, they wouldn't have to hide from one another forever. They could be in the same room together for a Thanksgiving, let alone in the same stadium at the same time.
So then how do you help a high conflict couple see that? You know, a couple that's divorcing, they're fairly amicable, they get it. But a high conflict couple, what do you explain to your high conflict client?
Well, first of all, I want to deal with the issue of the term high conflict, because that's a term that's thrown around all the time. And I guess at what point does somebody go from being a conflict to a high conflict situation? I dare say that I think that a lot of that, the high conflict situation, is caused by what happens at the beginning of the end of the relationship or the marriage. And I think it's that causes something to go from whatever the conflict was, if any, to a high conflict situation. And I know a gentleman who is not a lawyer. He deals with people from a mental health standpoint, and he's referred cases by the courts when there are high conflict situations and it's gotten to the point where the children are now suicidal because of what their parents are doing. And I've heard him speak, and he has said that on each and every occasion, he asks those parents, who have, by the way, not gone through just one lawyer each typically, but several, and he asked them if they had ever heard about the possibility of mediating a family law situation or doing a collaborative divorce or some other form of consensual dispute resolution. And every single time, according to him, they have told him that the first time they learned of such options were from him.
Wow, that's shocking. That's really shocking to me.
And we as lawyers are obligated to give our clients, we are ethically obligated to give our clients the different options available. And clearly, that's not happening. So the reality is, as I like to say, the way in which you choose to start the end of your relationship is going to determine how functional or dysfunctional your family will be from that point forward. And I think, but I can't say all the time, and clearly I would be wrong if I did say this happened all the time, but clearly the high conflict situations are caused by people going to lawyers who don't give them the options and choose instead to direct their clients to the one thing they know, which is litigating, which is destructive to families, and whatever the situation is that exists at that time, it's going to go nowhere but up in terms of the conflict.
Right. But you know what they say in family law, and probably in any kind of law, people tend to look for the type of lawyer that represents their personality. So if you have an individual who's very controlling, chances are they're going to look for a lawyer who's controlling. Like whatever those personality types are, and the issues in the marriage seem to play out throughout the divorce.
I'm not going to disagree with you that people look for a lawyer who has similar personality traits. In fact, I've written about that. I think that if one of the reasons that people switch lawyers is because they hire a lawyer, for instance, who happens to be more of a rational, logical, reasonable person, and they're not. And when and this is going to do nothing but set up a possible problem between the two of them, because the client doesn't want necessarily to hear any kind of logic or reason. So there the conflict occurs,
right.
and vice versa. But a lot of that also has to do, at least in the family law arena, with their mental state at that point. Because the reality is, and I've written about this, the reality is that studies were done by the psychological or mental health community a long time ago, back in the late 60s or early 70s, wherein it was found that the highest level of stress that anybody could experience in their life was the death of a spouse that they were happily married to, or the death of a child.
Right.
And absent that, the next highest level of stress is divorce. And it doesn't matter if they've been separated from each other for a couple of years and now they're getting divorced, it is still the next highest level of stress. And so to ignore that fact is ignorant. And so if somebody's at that level, and if they've never lost a spouse to death or a child to death, this is the highest level of stress that they've ever experienced in their lifetime. So let's not ignore that fact, and let's try to deal with it in a constructive way. And I think if you're helping people either on your own because you understand human nature and you recognize that they're suffering from this level of stress, because they always are, or you bring in mental health professionals, not necessarily for therapy, although that wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea. I'm talking about coaching, even if it's not in a collaborative divorce situation, to help people process their emotions in a constructive way. I don't think that people, if they get it, want to cause all the damage that they're going to cause by doing what it is that they think they want.
Right. So building on that, I've got a couple of things to ask you then. First of all, I read somewhere that you said the family law system in the United States destroys families. So if you want then to look for a lawyer who's the problem solver, who is more settlement oriented, What should people be asking during the consult of a lawyer that that they're considering to retain?
It's an interesting thing. People want to come in for a consultation with a lawyer, and they want to tell the lawyer what their problem is, and they want to hear from the lawyer what the answer to that problem is going to be, or what the lawyer thinks is going to turn out to be the result. And the reality is that studies have been done, and what lawyers even realistically perceive as the ultimate result have been found to be wrong far more often than they're right. So it's not necessarily a good idea to go and do that. And then what are you going to do? Go and interview a lawyer who's going to tell you what it is that you want to hear? Because I've had people who have come in here and asked me questions, told me their situation, which I can understand why they want a certain thing. I'll give you the for example. For example, a woman has a 5-year-old child. The father's never been in the picture. He knew it was his child. She never pursued him for child support. He never visited the kid. And then all of a sudden she realizes that she's been rather foolish because she could get child support and he is the parent. And so she goes to the Department of Child Support Services, gets a child support order, and all of a sudden the father comes out from the woodwork and says he wants to have visitation. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out his motives there. I mean, he wasn't interested in the child in the first place. Now all of a sudden he wants it because he's having to pay child support. Well, child support happens to be tied to percentage of time that each parent has with the child. So if the father's going to get some more time or some time, he has the potential to reduce the amount of child support that he's paying. So every single time the woman will come in and say, I want him not to have any visitation at all with the child. Well, that's just not going to happen.
No, children have a right. Children have a right to have a relationship with both parents.
The research bears out that absent very unusual circumstances, children are better off having a relationship with both of their parents. So I understand where the woman is coming from in that instance, but she's not going to win on it. Right. Now, the fact that every single time in my career that I have said that to a person who came in here with those circumstances, I have never been hired, leads me to conclude that somebody, and it can't possibly be the same one person, is telling them what they want to hear. But when they're ultimately going to court and pursuing the I want the father never to have any visitation, there's no way on earth they're getting it. So they're just hiring the lawyer who's telling them what it is that they want to hear. And I'm suggesting that people not do that, and that instead they interview a lawyer by asking different questions, not about their case. If they're asking about their case, that's asking the lawyer for what it is he gets paid for a living, to analyze their case. That's not a free consultation, even if the lawyer gives free consultations. At least for me, I won't give a free consultation on that kind of stuff. Plus, how would I know what the ultimate result is? Each judge has a lot of discretion, and not everything is so cut and dry.
Okay, so what should someone be asking? So they go in for the and by the way, I agree with you. That's what I wrote in the Smart Divorce, is that if a lawyer is telling you everything you want to hear, run the other way. So, and that's from a lot of research that I did with many, many lawyers across North America. So lawyers don't always agree on everything, but there are a couple of things that they do agree with, and that's one of the things that they do say is if somebody's telling you everything you want to hear, then that's not the lawyer that's going to work in your best interest.
Maybe that's why people switch attorneys so often, right? You know, the guy offered them everything, they didn't get it, so they're on to number 2 and then 3.
Or they have their own agenda.
But what they're not going to... Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, well, they also have their own agendas. They also have their own goals and objectives, and they're not realistic. So they're going to keep on going to the lawyer that's going to help them achieve those that's going to help them achieve those unrealistic objectives, either getting support at X amount or whatever it is. Those are the lawyers I think that really are not settlement oriented. They just want the battle. And I think those are probably lawyers that give you lawyers a bad name.
I don't disagree. And I haven't had the people who didn't come here at the beginning when I told them what they didn't want to hear. For example, going back to the child support situation with the father who's asking for custody, it's not like at some point in the future they find out that they didn't get what they had wanted from the other lawyer, and in fact I had told them what was really going to happen, and they're going to come back here. They're not, because they're embarrassed.
Yeah. So Mark, in terms of what we were discussing earlier then, finding a lawyer who is the problem solver, what should people really be asking then? Rather than just, here are the facts from my case, as you were saying, in terms of the consult, what should people really ask the lawyer?
Well, I think that what I didn't put in my article, but one of the most important things that I think a client needs to find out from the lawyer, if the client, for instance, has children, is basically what's happened in a lot of the family situations that they've handled, in the sense that, and again, the lawyer can tell them whatever it is that the lawyer wants to tell them, so they should validate this possibly by getting references. But they should be asking, are the parents, after you're finished, very often able to go to family functions together with their children? That might be an interesting question to ask. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I guess that's the type of resolution you're looking for, the dispute resolution. You're more likely to attend a function if you mediate as opposed to arbitrating or litigating.
No, I won't necessarily say that. I handle things that aren't mediated or litigated, and if they're handled in a constructive way, without motions being filed with court and a judge making a decision, things can be resolved in a non-adversarial manner, even though we're in some formal type of consensual dispute resolution. So I don't know that that's true. I think that I read a mediation book where they use this example. If I'm wearing a jacket, a sport coat, that you think looks terrible on me, and you tell me so, and I liked that jacket, I'm going to feel uncomfortable for the rest of the day, especially if I value your opinion. And I'm going to put that jacket in the closet in the future, and when I'm figuring out what I'm going to wear every morning, when I go in that closet, I'm going to look at that jacket, and chances I'm going to remember what it is that you said. And I may not, probably won't, take that jacket out. And I will remember what you said, and when I think of you, see you, talk to you, I'm going to remember that I don't wear my jacket that I used to wear and like because of what you said. But if somebody makes a character assassination against me, it's not the same, because I can give my jacket to a charity, to somebody else, burn it, throw it away, leave it in the closet, never have to wear it again. It's a piece of clothing. But a character assassination, and think about what it is that's being submitted to the court. You're basically assassinating the other person's character in order to get what it is that you want, and you're embellishing, oftentimes making stuff up, certainly making it worse than it was, bringing up things that were okay during the marriage, and all of a sudden now you're going to use it against your spouse, and painting yourself to look like the innocent victim who never did anything wrong. And the other side is doing the same. You can't take that back.
Right.
Even if the case gets settled without going in front of a judge, you can't take that back. And even if a person is enlightened and capable at some point of forgiving their spouse for having done that, they will not forget. So,
Yeah, I hear you there. Been there.
So, yeah, so I'm not, you can settle things without going down that path, even if you're not in mediation or collaborative. It just depends on the attorneys. I think if you get a problem-solving attorney on both ends, that's going to be far more likely. If you get a conflict creator on both ends, there's no likelihood that that's going to happen. And if you have a conflict creator on one end and a problem solver on the other end, I suspect it's going to come out better, based on my experience, than it would have if you had a conflict creator on both ends, because at least you have somebody there who's trying to give other options besides just going to court, because that's what the conflict creator knows, is the only thing we learn really in law school is going to court. We learn that here's what the law is, and either the facts apply to this particular law or they don't. The law applies to the particular set of facts or it does not. We don't learn how to solve problems. So when people are interviewing lawyers, they need to basically find out about a person, the lawyer.
So what do they ask?
To his well, I would think that they need to ask. They should probably ask about undergraduate, because we know that law school, according to the ABA website, does not teach problem-solving skills. The dean of Stanford has said that traditional law schools don't teach problem-solving. So if you're going to be interviewing a lawyer, and we know that law schools don't teach problem-solving, and I want to be careful when I say that because the Wall Street Journal came out recently with an article which indicated that some law schools are starting to teach some classes in problem-solving. However, I think that they would want to know what the person's undergraduate background is. I never had anybody ask me about what my undergraduate background is. Well, why might that be important? Because there are certain majors where I think you're going to learn problem-solving skills, whereas in other majors you're not. And as an example, and I don't have that major, mine was economics business, which happens to be a problem-solving major day in and day out. You're having to look at cause and effect. If I tweak this a certain way, what is going to be the ultimate outcome, and how is that going to change? That's problem-solving. But I think everybody would agree that engineering is a problem-solving major. And for those of us who have met engineers in our life of whatever type, they solve problems. That's what they do. And they don't just solve it in their particular field. In every aspect of their life, they try to solve problems. That's what they were taught. That's how their brain works.
I was told that lawyers in law school, they're taught to take positions. So having that kind of background really does help in family law then. You know, being more problem-solving oriented.
I think so, yeah. I think so, because really the only thing that we are taught in law school, like I said, is I didn't say this exactly, but we're taught to not get emotionally invested, to separate the emotion from the issue, to spot problems, and to then find out, based on what the law is, how to address the problem. But that is one way of solving a problem. There are lots of ways to solve problems. The application of the law is only one. Taking something to a judge for a judge to decide on the case is one way to solve a problem. And like I said before, in family law, it should be the last. And filing something with the character assassination that goes along with it, I add in there, because like I said, if you're going to resolve the thing in some sort of mediation or settlement conference or informally, after you have done that, you can't take it back.
Right. Would you say that a lawyer who is a mediator is more of a problem solver than a lawyer who doesn't mediate or who's known to be a hardcore litigator?
Mediation is a question that people would want to ask, is if the lawyer has received mediation training, because mediation is a problem-solving mechanism. We are one of the things about problem solving that's interesting is people, as we become more and more educated, we lose our creativity, and we only think of one way to solve a problem, even outside of law. And if you encourage people to come up with as many possible solutions to something that they can imagine, and maybe you have multiple people involved in that exercise, and you promise that you're not going to make judgment, then all of these options get thrown out. That's the creative part. You can encourage people to be creative if you encourage them to come up with a lot of different possible results. That's what we're taught in mediation. Then you use the logical part of your brain to analyze or evaluate the various options and to find out if all of them are feasible, and if so, which one is best suited for this particular situation, or possibly some of the options that the couple like the best aren't, when you put logic to it, they don't really work. So the evaluation of it is more of a left brain thing. And the creativity part, which is the brainstorming, which is taught in mediation, is the right brain part. And both parts of the brain should be functioning together to be doing the problem solving in family law, and I dare say in other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
But mediation, at least in California, it's not regulated. So somebody who left high school and didn't do particularly well could open up a office and say, I'm a mediator. They don't have to have any kind of formal training. So you need to be careful who you go to and who says that they're a mediator and what kind of training, if any, they did receive. And did they receive the 40-hour basic training 10 years ago and then never do anything as far as getting additional education? Because the best mediators tend to be those who are always adding new tools to their toolbox, and they read a lot of books, and they keep up on new ways of doing things and other people's suggestions that they may never have considered, take other trainings, do practices at the trainings and things of this nature. So that, yes, asking somebody if they're not a mediator but trained in mediation, and if so, how? What courses have they taken? When have they taken? When did they take them? What have they done in this regard? Do they read books regularly on the process? Is more than just asking, do they do mediation or have they been trained in it?
Those are really good points. I think that when people are looking for a lawyer, people have a pretty rough idea of questions to ask, but they don't necessarily have the right questions to ask of a mediator. So I think that you've just raised awareness in terms of what people need to consider as well. And I think for a mediator, or even for a lawyer, Mark, what do you think? People have different areas of expertise, and do people probe that? There are some lawyers that are more financially oriented, or some that are more seen as being child rights advocates. People do have their areas of expertise.
That's true.
And in mediation, I would think that's the same. There are some that are more financially savvy than others. So those are definitely questions that you have to probe. Well,
maybe yes, maybe no. there are different types of mediation. There's evaluative mediation, which is more of settlement conference type things that lawyers typically think of, where you're evaluating somebody's position. There's facilitative mediation, where you're helping the couple come to a resolution without making evaluations. There's transformational mediation, where you're helping people learn to communicate better because, for instance, they need to be able to co-parent or they're continuing to operate a business together after it's finished. So there's different types. But if you're doing facilitative mediation and you're not being evaluative, then why would it matter if you have a better understanding of numbers or you don't?
Well, what if you have a complicated, but what if you have a complicated portfolio that's being divided between the couple?
Well, but it's not the mediator's job to do anything other than to help the couple reach an agreement using tools that they have learned to do so. So the mediator's not to evaluate stuff, really. And so if they have a complicated portfolio, then maybe we need to bring in a forensic accountant, or we need to bring in some regular accountant, or somebody else. Maybe we need to bring in a child specialist, for example. In a child situation, that's not the mediator's job. It's the mediator's job to help the people get past an impasse. Mm-hmm. That's the job, to help them get their matter resolved. That's it. Using creative means to get the matter resolved from a needs and interest-based standpoint. And positions what people want are not their needs and interests. For example, if somebody goes into an estate planning attorney's office and calls them up and says, I want to have a will, in California at least, if the person owns real estate or has more than $100,000 of assets, chances are when they go into that lawyer's office, they're going to actually hire that lawyer for a living trust, not a will. So the person said, I want a will, they left with a living trust. If somebody comes to a lawyer's office in family law and says, I want a will, they're not going to say that because that's not why they're going to the family law lawyer's office. Mm-hmm. But the example is, if they come into a family law lawyer's office and say, I want a will, the lawyer is going to say, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you get a will. Well, what if the will wasn't the best thing for the client? And what if the will is, and the will would be the house, for example. So by the time one of them, they're both arguing over who's going to get the house, and you could have resolved it in a different way to meet both of the underlying needs that they each had, but by the time you both get all the way up to the judge to find out who is going to get to keep the business or who is going to get to keep the house, by the time you both finished paying all your legal fees, there's a good chance neither of you could afford to keep the house, even if the judge gave it to one of you.
So there's no problems to be solved any longer. Yeah.
But there are other things that people could ask lawyers in order to find out if they're problem solvers. For instance, somebody could have played athletics and learned problem solving even though they may never have been taught it in any formal education. I don't think anybody would say that a quarterback would not have problem solving skills. That's that position in football requires it. So I think that there are certain extracurricular or life experiences that people could have in order to develop good problem-solving skills. You just need to ask about these types of things. If you've done stage acting, I don't care about TV acting that's not live or movies, because that can be taken, they could do take after take after take. But if you're doing a live performance, there's always going to be some problem. There's going to be a technical problem. Somebody, even if it's not you, is going to flub a line maybe. And every day it's going to be different. And you have to be able to think on your feet and solve problems in order to get through that performance and hopefully not have the audience recognize that there had been a mistake. Same with playing in a orchestra live. So there are things that I understand that I wasn't in Boy Scouts, but I understand I have no reason to doubt that if somebody was in Boy Scouts, they're going to learn certain problem-solving skills.
Well, we know you're a problem solver. How do you communicate to your clients or to your prospective clients that you're a problem solver? How do you let them know?
Well, when the person comes into my office, I'm basically from the very beginning trying to find out how I can help them solve their problems. In fact, there was an article that was written and published in the Pasadena Lawyer magazine that said that when somebody comes into my office, I'm not going to say I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to say, how can I help you solve your problem? So the article basically was called Finding the Solution from August 9, 2011. That's what I do. So they're going to know that from the minute they come in here. Or they're going to know it before they came in here, which is why they will come in the first place.
I like that. Well, I think you've really, we opened this up saying that you provoke people to think. And I think this has been a really thought-provoking interview.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
All right. It's been a pleasure as well. Thank you.
A lot of good information from Mark Baer, Debbie.
Oh, the information was fabulous. And what I really liked was how he enlightened us in terms of the different concepts that mediators can really pursue. Mm-hmm. So not only must you interview lawyers, but you need to interview a mediator to make sure that they've got the right skill set for you.
It's why what you do and Divorce Source Radio does is so important, to educate people to know what to do, because you really don't if you haven't been taught.
That's right. So, you've got to pull that dream divorce team together. So even if you've got the right lawyer, the right mediator, what about the right financial expert or the right parenting expert? Like, there's so many different people, and I think that Mark really helped us understand that, so that not everyone is going to have the expertise that you need. Like we talked about the mediator, and I said to him, well, if you've got a complicated portfolio, don't you want a mediator that's more financially savvy? And he said, no, that's not necessarily the case. So it just goes to show you that you need to bring in the right individuals that are going to provide you with that assistance.
Well, it's kind of saying it's not the mediator's role to do that. That's where the mediator can bring in other experts. And that's when it comes back to what you talked about, being that dream team that we all really need.
Yeah, the dream divorce team. And, people will say, isn't that a little bit expensive? Like, people ask me that quite a bit. Like, isn't it expensive to bring in this person and that person? But at the end of the day, when you really think about it, isn't it expensive to try to go back and repair mistakes if you can't repair those mistakes?
I had 3 attorneys. All right, so you take the retainer from the first 2 and just throw it away. Throw it away. It's another problem I have with some of these attorneys. Now you're getting me angry. I mean, attorneys will take your money as a retainer from time to time. And if your relationship separates, you don't get all your money back. Now, some of the retainer agreements say that they will reimburse you, but I don't know if it's been your experience with some of your clients, but many I know didn't receive anything in return.
I'm surprised. And that's what I liked about our interview with Mark today, is that he talked to us about the problem-solving lawyer. And I would think that those lawyers that aren't returning the retainer, are they more conflict creators? And I think that's a really good way of looking at it. So when you're looking for a lawyer to move through your divorce, and how do you want that relationship to unfold 5, 10, 20 years post-divorce, the type of lawyer you had is really going to make a difference. Is it someone that's going to help you achieve a more amicable divorce, or is it someone that's going to be help you with a more acrimonious divorce? Really something to consider.
For sure. Well, another great show. If you'd like to write Debbie, you can write her direct. Where, Deb?
Of course, it's info@thesmartdivorce.com.
Thank you again, Deborah.
Thank you.
As always, I hope the program helped you. If you have a comment or question you'd like to ask us, we'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a voicemail on our listener line at area code 248-686-2256. Or drop us an email with your question or comment to divorcesourceradio@gmail.com. New programs are available every week on divorcesourceradio.com, as well as iTunes, BlackBerry, Stitcher, and all over the web. If you'd like to be notified when new programs are available, you can follow us on Twitter. Our follow word is Divorce Source. Also, if you're not listening from our website, I invite you to stop by divorcesourceradio.com, where you'll find a complete program archive. If you're looking for a specific subject, simply type it into our search engine, and chances are you'll find what you're looking for. We also have other resources available at our website as well. And while you're on our website, click on the Facebook icon and join the growing Divorce Source Radio Facebook community. Thanks for listening. Until next time, make it a great week and stay healthy. I'm Steve Peck.